And welcome to the video on how do you write your job cost report. In order to do this, I'd like you to have a few things ready. One is your workbook, and secondly, the report on bags galore that we've written and sent through to you. And thirdly, the answers that you've already created on the Excel spreadsheet. We'll use that and we'll look at the questions that you've got to do as you're going through this report. Anytime press pause. If I'm going too fast, rewind and check it out again. What's also useful in this report is that you've got some sticky tabs so that you can put that in your workbook at the appropriate places. On the left hand side you can see I've got questions that will be in your internal, and the right hand side is a report that's written that you already have a copy of. It's an exemplar. So we'll go through the first part. The first part, page 279 in your report, is giving you who is Bags Galore. So really you've got in the blue there what you'll just type up: Bags Galore manufacturers, each suitcase is made, and then the two cost centres are the machining and finishing department. So basically that's what the first introduction is. Note that the introduction is not long. There's not many, if any, marks for here, but it's important you have it for your report. Also, why are you writing this report? So the reason to write this report is to understand the importance of accurately costing jobs. So then we get into the next part, the internal controls, which is the guts of the report, and a lot of marks are in here. So the internal controls, we've got to do that on materials requisition, timesheets and job cost card. So in your book, you need to click a tab on. Just a sticky note tab would be awesome. And if you do these as you're going down the page, you've done a lot of work on this already, so it should be easy for you to use. So page 263, put your first tab there, and that's a materials requisition form. And so the materials requisition form, you've got to define it first. So it's just the first part. And I've said they use Bags Galore name in there. It's for when source documents when goods come out of the raw materials store and into the factory. And it's a bit of paper as evidence of that. And you can see that's here. A source document to transfer raw materials from raw materials store to two sections of the factory. That's the finishing, assembly, and the machining. Then you've got to write what are the internal controls. So you can see there's 4 bullet points on that page 263. Remember, you only got your workbook. You do not have any other notes for this. So pre-numbered is important, and so it is pre-numbered, so the factory can see all are accounted for. So because it's got that pre-numbered part in there, that is an internal control. The so part gives you the merit part it justifies. And you probably want a couple of others there too, so you can choose a couple of others on the page 263. I said it will be signed by the factory supervisor, again, to authorise that transfer. All right, so that authorises the merit part. And then you need, for a merit, you need a number in there. So if you go to your Bags Galore, you'll see that for travelling trunks, there's 1,800 that's been transferred to the machining department. So that figure will go in here. All right, so that's the first part. Your second tab, your sticky note, put on page 264, and this is your timesheet. Again, the definition of a timesheet first, and I've got a definition up here, a record of the hours spent on each task, what it has on it. So that's a good start. Then the internal controls will record the traceable hours. So really what we're after is internal controls here, and internal controls will be the employee's name. Why is that an internal control? All right, because it gives accountability back to that employee, and the supervisor can ask, how come you spent so many hours on that? And also the time each day, the job number is important, so it gets allocated to the right job. The so that again is the merit part, and then obviously signed off by the supervisor to make sure that they're reasonable. And so then an example of this is the hours charged in the finishing department. So for this job, we can see, well, you have to look at your book, page 280 there, and you'll see there's 150 hours charged to the finishing department for direct labour in that last box down the bottom. And you can talk about as a cost of direct labour, 3,000. Oh no, $20 per hour, so 3,000 will be here. All right, so then let's finish the timesheet. So you're then after your job cost card, and your job cost card, again, you've got stuff on page 266. I'm not going to go through that in depth, but again, you need to talk about what is a job cost card, what are the controls in that, and then put some figures in here. So total cost of the job, and you've got a total cost of here, 8,380. And you can talk about direct materials, direct labour, and factory overhead by adding those figures up here. Okay, so then we get cost centres. So the cost centre is an important part. So finishing department, we are bringing that in, saying that it's going to be, we're using machine hours. So you need to justify machine hours. So machine hours is because it's capital intensive. That sort of almost gives you the achieved mark there. You need to prove why it is capital intensive. So again, page 280 there, you can start talking about the major costs in the machining department in terms of overhead are, and you can see them here. So the costs are the estimated costs. The major costs are depreciation and other factory costs, quite large compared to the indirect labour, and they are based because the depreciation, right, estimated 70,000, other factory 90,000, such as depreciation, electricity, and machine repairs. You can read through the rest of that and understand why, but we need to get that $4.50 per machine hour. The finishing department, if you look at that, you can see the major cost in finishing department. Got other factory overheads there and indirect labour. We can see the depreciations drop right back. So the major cost in there is around looking after the employees, evidenced by a decrease in depreciation to 5,000. Make sure you get those figures in. A factory supervisor, increase in indirect labour. So we've gone from 20,000 to 40,000, such as the factory supervisor. Okay, and you need to say, really the important part up here is that the more the machine works, the higher the overhead. In this case, the more direct labour, the higher the overhead. So it's justifying it back. So if we go back to the question then, that one. The next part is details of the two cost centres. So we've done the two cost centres, the justification of the application of the overhead. So we've done that one. The importance of allocation. So we're going to do these two here together. So the next part is the overheads. In both departments, overheads do not match the actual overhead. I'd like you again to look at page 280, and you can see that the top box and the second box, so where there's a difference. So examples where there are differences are, you can see that particularly for the machining department, remember we're using machine hours on that. We estimated that there were going to be 40,000 machine hours, and the actual machine hours are 44. Make sure you can find both those figures. So we allocated 4,000 more machine hours than we expected. So therefore we charge 4,000 multiplied by that $4.50, more than we expected. So when we look over here, we can see that we over allocated overheads by 23,000. That's the main reason. If you multiply 4,000 times $4.50, that counts for 18 out of the 23. The other part will be that we actually had an increase in our overheads. See, depreciation went from 7,000 up to 78,000. So that's an increase in the overheads there. But more importantly, the factory overhead decreased from 90,000 down to 75,000. So we thought that our overheads were going to be 90. They were only 75. So that's another reason why we've allocated more. There's a $15,000 gap there. And if you read through here, just press pause and just read through and complete that part for the machining department. So we've only got 4 minutes left. The finishing department, same thing. If you look at the top, we've got the direct labour hours, which are going to be 24,000. How many actually did we have? So hopefully you've answered 20,000 there. So we had 4,000 less direct labour hours that we used to charge overheads than we expected. So 4,000 at $5 is 20,000. You can see that we under-allocated not by 20,000, only by 8,000. But the first bit is a 20,000 under-allocation there. And so because of that, we under-allocated our overheads. See here, it's 8,000 under-allocated. The other reason is looking at the other cost there, and you can see that the depreciation, that was the same. Indirect labour costs, that was 2,000 less, and you can see that we've got other factory overheads 10,000 less. So they all link to why we've got under-allocated. Again, press pause, read through, fill out the gaps here to get those right figures in there. Okay, so I need to get to the last part. Hopefully you can get that part, because those parts are pretty critical for the excellence. Let's have a look at the last couple of sections. So you've got the details for the travelling trunk job, an explanation of the job. So that's linking this part here. We've said here that they must work harder to get accurate costing. Now, this links back to the importance of allocating overhead correctly. I've asked you to use the word viability, and viability is really key for excellence here. So the problem in the first department of over-allocating the overheads means that we may charge too much to our customers. If we charge too much to our customers, then we're no longer as competitive as perhaps we need to be. Therefore, they might go find somewhere else to go. In our finishing department, because we under-allocated by 8,000, and we're undercharging, and because we're undercharging in that department, that means that potentially we're not covering all our costs. And by not covering all our costs, it means that there could be a potential loss there. The other part is really important just to get this accurate so we can actually cost our jobs overall correctly. All right, so that links us to the last part, is the details of the job. This one here, this appendix, that's the accounting entries you've done. So really we're just doing the details of the travelling trunk. So that's not actually hard, that part, because you're just linking it to these costs here. So the 100 travelling trunks, they include direct material, labour and overhead within the departments. The total cost is that figure there. Markup of 125%, which is standard in the industry. That's given to you in the question on page halfway down page 280. Make sure you can find that 125% there. And that markup is to cover other costs such as distribution, administration and financial. And we can see there in our book our other accounting and marketing costs. You got 43,000 and 66,000. That's quite a lot to cover. And then they're adding the profit margin on there as well. And basically that gives you the total cost of the travelling trunk. So press pause for a sec. So just to finish, this is the marking schedule. This one's for white aluminium, but you can see the same for the report. You've got the costs. These are just your entries to get those right. What I really want to draw your attention to is down here. So to get achieved, you define the terms, related them back to, in this case, it'll be bags, galore, and the travelling trunks. In depth, you must use figures from the resource in each section, and comprehensive, you must evaluate and justify the reason and effectiveness of those controls. So that justified is so that type of stuff. What's really important also is that you talk about the viability. Without getting the costs right, the viability of the firm is problematic, and they're not charging all their costs, or they're charging too much, so they'll go somewhere else. That's all from me. Good luck for the assessment.